So on today's menu, we have an appetizer, an introduction salad, where we're going to talk about who Adopt-a-Cookstove is and what our role is. We're going to move into a main course, analysis two ways, where we're going to have a market research and landscape analysis. And then finally, for dessert, we have chocolate dip deliverables, brand, website, and infographic. So our appetizer, who is Adopt-a-Cookstove? Adopt-a-Cookstove is a project that looks to solve inefficient cooking in developing countries. This project specifically is looked and focused in Rwanda. So inefficient cooking is where you can think of cooking over like a campfire. This leads to a lot of health problems, such as 4 million deaths per year worldwide from air pollution. It means that people have to spend up to 5 hours a day collecting fuel, and it also results in 5.5 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions per year from any family using an inefficient cooking method. So this can be solved by introducing clean cook stoves. So the model that our project uses is called the Mimimoto. That reduces particulate matter 2.5 by up to 97%, resulting in better health for cook stove users. It also reduces the amount of time needed to collect fuel by up to 4 hours. And finally, it reduces up to 5 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year per cook stove. So a much healthier solution than using traditional cooking methods. This last metric, the 5 metric tons, is the same as 28 mountain gorillas, which is a native species to Rwanda. Now, where we come in is we have this great solution to solve inefficient cooking, but we need to make sure that people actually are able to buy the carbon credits that are produced as a result of distributing these cook stoves. So we developed both a brand and a website for Adopt-a-Cookstove to help them be able to communicate with potential carbon credit buyers. Now we'll move into our main course. I'm going to start with the market research, and then I'll hand it off to Max to walk you through the landscape analysis. For our market research, we focused on 3 broad categories of people. First, carbon credit purchasers, then cookstove developers, and finally, third-party carbon brokers. If you're not familiar with carbon brokers, they essentially are trying to pair up these cookstove developers and carbon credit purchasers so that people who are developing credits can then sell them on to people who want to buy them. From each of these groups, we found some key findings. First, from the carbon credit purchasers, we found that story and co-benefits, which are things like the health impacts that we talked about or extra time, are really key elements. They want to be able to talk to their stakeholders about what is happening beyond just the offsetting of their carbon emissions. From cookstove developers, we found that brokers were huge assets to them. They often helped in facilitating certifications, as well as finding people to buy the carbon credits once they were developed. And finally, from the third-party carbon brokers, we found that gold standard was the most common certification method used. So with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Max to walk you through the landscape analysis.
Thanks, Eamon. So the other component of our research involved a landscape analysis of offset projects and programs that are similar in nature to the Adopt-a-Cookstove project. For this component, we analyzed the websites of 6 existing cookstove offset projects and programs. These included projects such as Impact Carbon and organizations such as the Clean Cooking Alliance. So on these project websites, we looked at a variety of factors, including their project objective, the mission statement, the overall design and layout of the website, the main benefits or co-benefits that were highlighted, as well as how much emphasis they placed on carbon pricing and certification. So in terms of key findings, first, unsurprisingly, we found that there are a variety of different website designs, with some designs being more inspiring than others. And second, we found that most websites really highlighted the co-benefits of their respective projects, which really complemented our market research findings in regards to co-benefits. And lastly, we found that there are discrepancies in terms of third-party certification and how it was displayed, with some sites prominently displaying accreditation from carbon credit certification entities, such as Gold Standard, and other sites having no display of certification. So with that, I will now hand it off to Tyanna to walk you through our project deliverables.
Hey, thanks, Max. So for this part, we're going to go over the dessert, so the brand, the website, and the infographic. So before we can make anything, we had to really figure out what style we wanted to make and brand the whole company. And based on what was said before, we realized now that our target audience mainly composed of company owners and third-party brokers. And because of this, we wanted to keep the tone of everything very lighthearted and professional. For the colors, there are two main ones. This first one to the left is more of a tactful, like red color to signify passion and a call to action. But we also wanted to offset that with something that was a little more toned down and happy, warm, and friendly with this orangey yellow to the right. For the font, we really wanted something that was easily readable across a lot of different types of platforms, and also one that was widely used in professional settings. And so we chose the font Tyanna. And then for the logo to the left, we wanted to incorporate something that this whole project was based on, which is this Mimimoto cookstove. So we created like a very mini version of it. And then for the imagery, we wanted to highlight the community and the storytelling aspect. So the Cookstove team, the past summer, I believe, they were able to capture a lot of pictures from the community using these cookstoves. So we incorporated a lot of that into the website. And then we have these icons that signify the co-benefits. So with that, using our style guide, we were able to create our website and our infographic. So for the sake of time, we kind of just screenshotted a couple of shots from our website. And this is pretty much the first thing that you'll see when you enter the link to our website. And it has just a one sentence description of what it is, along with the pictures of the community. And you can see the colors that we selected on there as well. So scrolling down from that first picture, you have the co-benefits that we're trying to highlight. And it's just a really small description of like the problem and the solution. And then here is a screenshot on our About Us page, just highlighting the vision and the mission of the company. And this part, the Get Involved area, is on the bottom part of our front page. And this is all the information that we have now because the company is still in its developing stage. But as the company gets more evolved, we will eventually have a call to action button, such as like donate and buy a cookstove today. But that's something for later. This is a screenshot of our infographic. It's usually more vertical, but for the sake of this slide, we kind of just cut it and put it side by side. But if you can see here, it mainly just highlights the benefits of using efficient cookstoves versus inefficient cookstoves. So to get a full experience of our website, here is the link. But again, the link will be on the Bren Connect website. And with that, we'd like to acknowledge the entire Adopt-a-Cookstove team, everyone that we've interviewed, and Lisa, who's been our wonderful advisor. And so with that, thank you so much for watching, and we're open to answer any questions that anyone may have.
So it looks like we have a question from Molly Brennan. It says, what type of fuel does the cookstove use? I'm happy to answer that one. The Mimimoto in particular uses wood pellets. The team analyzed a number of different cookstove models, which would use things like LPG, liquid propane, as well as things like crop waste, regular standard wood or charcoal, but the Mimimoto itself uses wood pellets. Looks like we have another one, and probably this will be the last one from Shetty. It says, what was one of the most compelling stories from the local people about the receipt of the cookstoves, and how will you communicate your messages? I can speak a little bit. None of us were actually on the trip, but from the videos that we saw, they were very happy to be able to get something that wasn't super polluting. They as a community had realized that there might be some issues with some of those methods, because you can actually visibly see the smoke coming off, whereas with the Mimimoto you don't see that. And I'll let Max or Tyanna maybe answer some of the second half of that with how we will communicate our message.
Sure, Eamon. Yeah, so I think just utilizing some of those great photos that were taken during that trip to Rwanda. Yeah, again, for the sake of time, we weren't able to showcase a lot of those, but there were a lot of great photos that were taken by the Adopt-a-Cookstove team during that during that trip, and hopefully that can be used to better communicate this story of Adopt-a-Cookstove moving forward.
Great. Tyanna, do you want to say any final words?
Thank you everyone again for for watching our presentation. We hope you learned something. I guess, yeah, with that, hope you had a great full course that we served you today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation, and really lovely job with the project, the vibrant colors, and just sort of helping out with an organization getting off the ground. It's always important to have a good storytelling. And so now we will transition to the ocean and the coast. So we will be looking at this project for the California Coastal Commission, and the name of it is Let's Talk About Sea Level Rise. And so this project looked at messaging around sea level rise, as well as different outreach materials associated with that. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to Adrienne Hewitt and Shellby Johnson.
Okay, we'll share our screen. Was this it? Actually, yeah. No, that's not it. It's not. Sorry. Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry about that. We are going to get rolling now. Okay, so good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our presentation today. Our communication capstone project is called Let's Talk About Sea Level Rise, communicating sea level rise to general public audiences. And our client was the California Coastal Commission. I'm Shelby Johnson, and with me is my teammate, Adrienne Hewitt. So to help prepare California for climate change impacts, the Coastal Commission provides several informative resources to the public on their website, such as guidance documents talking about sea level rise planning and adaptation, as well as the science behind sea level rise. However, they have received some feedback that the information on their sea level rise page can be a little overwhelming to online readers. The California Coastal Commission works a lot with coastal planners, so their documents are often geared towards audiences with a deeper understanding of scientific concepts. So a big goal for this project was to help the public better engage with sea level rise information. The other big goal was to create informational materials related to sea level rise science, planning, and adaptation that would be visually appealing and also something that the public could digest more easily. So you see, the information was there, we just needed a little help with the messaging. So our two main deliverables were a story map and an infographic. Story maps are just really a great way for readers to engage with information through storytelling rather than cut and dry facts. The CCC also had one digital story map prior about environmental justice, and so they felt it would be beneficial to have something similar for this topic that could also live on the website. Infographics can provide visual aid to help readers understand scientific and technical concepts and explain concepts in a condensed, visually appealing, and quick to read format. So we were eager to get the ball rolling, but we quickly realized that we hadn't created either of these tools before. So we knew a lot of individualized learning was ahead of us, but we were up for the challenge. So when I mentioned engaging the public about sea level rise in California, some groups were targeted in particular. So people who depend on the beach for public recreation, so beachgoers, people who live in properties threatened by sea level rise and coastal erosion, so coastal property owners, and people who may be unfamiliar with sea level rise planning process, like just in general. These three groups encompassed a large set of people who would really benefit from understanding how sea level rise is impacting their state and the importance of planning now to protect the coast for the future. So for the story map, the purpose was really to highlight real examples of sea level rise impacts on the California coast, focusing on how the Coastal Commission has addressed this and how they aim to help coastal communities plan and prepare for the future. We wanted the story map to feel like a collective effort between the Coastal Commission and the public. So the feeling would be less about this is what sea level rise is and more of this is what sea level rise is doing to our state, how you should be involved and why you should care, and how also you can use the agency as a resource. So to achieve this vision, the story map was designed using the ArcGIS story map platform, and I also included elements from Canva. The end goal was to really create something that was inviting, informative, interactive, and inspiring. So we will just take a brief scroll through the story map, the final version, which is entitled Sea Level Rise in California, Planning for the Future. So something you'll notice straight away, and that's throughout the story map, is that I tend to break up a lot of the text with eye-catching photos and very informative graphics to remind the readers as they're scrolling through why they should want to protect parts of the coast and why it's so important to do so. Just like this playground here that is being flooded by a king tide. There's just more beautiful pictures of the coast throughout the story map, as well as a graphic about seawalls that sort of teaches readers how they can actually be more destructive than helpful because they can actually erode the shoreline. Another element that was really important for me to incorporate was connecting a sense of place to location. So there are a few maps in here, and it's ArcGIS, right? So might as well take advantage of that. So you see a map here where readers can see this picture of coastal erosion happening in Pacifica. And if they don't know where that is, they can just see right over here in the map that it's in the Bay Area and maybe even realize if they live in this area, wow, this is something that was going on in my backyard. So if we keep scrolling, there are more pictures that are just, like I said, kind of creating that white space, breaking up the text. There's more maps here showing about local coastal program areas, and this example is in San Diego County. And moving on, another important element was to really include interactive parts that people can really engage with, like this video that shows the process of how local coastal programs are made, which was made in Canva, and then I embedded it into the story map. And overall, just wanted it to feel hopeful. Sea level rise can be a little daunting to talk about, but we wanted people to go away feeling like they had more information and the tools to really get involved in their community. So I will pass this back to my colleague, Adrienne, to talk about the infographic and to close out our project.
Thank you, Shellby. So to help people understand how they can plan for sea level rise, it's important for them to know how it is affecting them and the options that are available for dealing with these impacts. This is why we chose for the infographic to illustrate and describe the impacts of sea level rise in California and the various adaptation strategies that can be implemented to address these impacts. From the start, I envisioned the infographic depicting a broad scene that will show the different sea level rise impacts on various parts of the landscape. And then I wanted to show zoomed in scenes of the affected parts of the landscape and how they would look having implemented an adaptation strategy. Overall, the goal of the infographic is to be illustrative and informative and distilled to aid the reader in taking in complex information. Creating the infographic was an iterative process. And so showing here is the very first visual outline that I created of it, and this was created in Word. I had to learn how to use Adobe Illustrator to create the final version of the infographic, and here it is shown. The infographic will mainly live within the Sea Level Rise section of the Coastal Commission's website, and it is to be shown as an embedded image or a PDF file on the site. However, I did create several different 1- and 2-sided versions for the Coastal Commission to possibly use as printed material. In conclusion, the Coastal Commission was looking for a new approach to presenting great information. So with these informational tools, they will hopefully be able to better engage the general public and help them understand how sea level rise is affecting their state and how they can be involved in planning for the future. The story map and infographic will be introductory visuals that people will see when they go to the Sea Level Rise section of the Coastal Commission's website. So with these and other documents that are on the site, it is our hope that the reader will leave informed and inspired to get involved in the Sea Level Rise planning process. We would like to express our thanks to Sumi Selvaraj, Nowaki Schwartz, Eric Martinez, Mary Matella, and the rest of the California Coastal Commission team who proposed and collaborated with us on this project. We would also like to thank Dr. Lisa Leombruni, Bren's Environmental Communication Program Director, for her continued support and guidance. Thank you all for listening, and we are now welcome to answer your questions. Thank you, Shetty. We have one question. There's so much information about sea level rise. How did you choose the key points to include in the story map and the infographic? So I would say that this was a very collaborative process. So we, through various meetings, discussed a lot with the Coastal Commission team that we worked with about what information would be best and most helpful for the various audiences that they wanted to reach. And so we collaborated on choosing the information that we wanted to put in the story map and infographic to best reach these audiences. Do you want to answer one more?
Sure. If we have time for one more, somebody asked, do you see a need for the Coastal Commission to tailor resources to specific coastal communities like Isla Vista versus Malibu? That's a great question, Caitlin. Thank you for that. So I think these would be really good examples of what local communities can sort of possibly create on their own. When I talked about local coastal programs within the story map, those are policies and things like zoning ordinances that are sort of tailored down to these specific places. And so I think what we have created here could possibly be a really good sort of stepping stone for resources that these local communities can maybe take and try to make something that's more specific for them. And maybe even in the future, the Coastal Commission could make something where it's like a pamphlet or a booklet that maybe has some really specific visuals for like these individual coastal communities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to head it off to the next team.
Great, thank you again. That was just so wonderful, and there are many other comments in the box saying the same. I know it can be challenging sometimes when you have such dense information, but you did a wonderful job of selecting really the most relevant, breaking it down, and then of course, making a wonderful resource. So now we're gonna stick with the ocean theme, and we're gonna go to a project that was done for Get Hooked, which is a local community supported fishery. The name of the project is Get Hooked Seafood Marketing. And so I'd like to now pass it over to Corinna and Sidney Gerst.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Corinna, and I'm here with Sidney to welcome you to Get Hooked Seafood Marketing. The Santa Barbara fishery supports 150 owner-operator small boat vessels out of the Port of Santa Barbara. These vessels produce 11.2 million pounds of seafood on average annually. They also generate $11.3 million in annual earnings on average. Sadly, only a small proportion of the seafood stays in Santa Barbara, which means that residents are missing out on fresh, local seafood. This is where Get Hooked comes in. Get Hooked is a subscription-based seafood delivery program founded by Kim Selko and Victoria Voss to provide local, sustainable seafood to the community and increase support and visibility for Santa Barbara fisheries and fishers. Get Hooked Seafood is a community-supported fishery which provides benefits to fishers, customers, and the community. Fishers benefit from a shorter supply chain, which yields better prices paid to fishers for their catch. Customers enjoy direct access to fresh local seafood along with information on who caught their seafood, where, and how. Get Hooked customers also get weekly emails containing recipes and seafood preparation instructions. In turn, the community supports local food systems while building connections to Santa Barbara fishers. In working with Get Hooked, our goals were to conduct audience research for new customer retention and create educational outreach materials. Going through the rest of the presentation, we will introduce the areas that helped us achieve our goals. First, we will show survey results from Get Hooked customers, then look at the composition of Get Hooked members. Next, we will discuss customer retention and then present the infographics we made. Get Hooked saw a spike in new members due to California's stay-at-home order in March. In order to better understand Get Hooked's growing audience, we created a survey, demographic, and perception information. We separated our audience into two groups, new and existing, to see how they differ. Each group got the same survey, but separating them made it easier for us to tease out differences. We then analyzed the demographic data and created a statistical model to predict the likelihood of continued membership. This is what our audience looks like. 37% of them are new customers, with 50% of them joining Get Hooked due to changes in grocery access because of COVID-19. New customers range in age from 35 years old and up. When looking at the audience as a whole, Get Hooked members are aged 25 and older, with a small spike in the 55 to 65-year-old age bracket. And a majority of them have an annual income between $101,000 and $150,000. Here are the results from our customer retention model. This shows a customer's predicted probability of continuing based on income group. Our model predicts a high probability that customers across all income groups will be likely to continue with Get Hooked. But it's important to note that those with lower annual incomes have higher predicted probabilities of being unsure, so those are the green bars, about continuing than those with higher annual incomes. This second graph shows a customer's predicted probability of continuing based on their perceptions of seafood delivery necessity. Our model predicts an increase in the probability of continuing a Get Hooked membership as an individual's perception of necessity progresses from unnecessary to necessary. For both income and grocery necessity, our model predicted very low probabilities of customers deciding not to continue with Get Hooked.
So we wanted to take the information that we learned from our model and channel it into good educational infographics that Get Hooked can use for their audience. And we wanted to take the branding material that Get Hooked already uses, such as in their website here, and incorporate that into our infographics that we'll send out to them. These are the 6 colors that they typically use in their branding materials and the 2 fonts that they use as well as their Get Hooked icon. So this is our first infographic explaining the 4 health benefits of seafood, where we explain the 4 health benefits of seafood, but we've broken it up a little bit better so you can see other tidbits that we've included as well. Our next big infographic is about community-supported seafood, and in Santa Barbara specifically, where we explain Santa Barbara fisheries and the different kinds of seafood that are caught here off the coast. And then we explain why it's important to support local seafood with a local fisherman testimonial. And finally, we show that Get Hooked seafood is important and you have access to so many cool things such as recipe and seafood handling tips. These are more smaller scale infographics, where the one on the left is international versus local seafood and why it's important to order local rather than international. We go through greenhouse gas emissions, bycatch, freshness, and cost of labor. The infographic on the right goes through the fresh water required to grow 1 pound of protein, comparing the amount of water it takes to grow beef versus soy versus wild caught seafood, which takes almost no fresh water use. And then our last infographic is also explaining the difference of resource use between beef, pork, and wild caught seafood, where the number of times greater the other 2 protein types are than wild caught seafood, where we compare total CO2 emitted total freshwater consumption, and total land use change. So these are the deliverables that we're turning in to Get Hooked. We've created these infographics. We completed a survey at the beginning of the quarter that we used in our audience research report and have incorporated the model into the report that we will give to them. We hope that Get Hooked will be able to use these materials in their social media posts, as well as their weekly emails and website content. So in conclusion, Corinna and I specifically have learned so much about Santa Barbara fisheries and how they are a social and economic staple to our community. We've learned that the Get Hooked community is overall likely to continue with their subscription beyond stay-at-home orders, continuing with local healthy seafood options. And hopefully our infographics will be able to continue to educate them, and Get Hooked will continue to use them as a resource. We'd like to give a big thanks again to Kim Selko and Victoria Voss of Get Hooked, and of course Lisa Leombruni of the Bren School Environmental Communication and Media Program. Thank you. We will now welcome your questions. Oh, here. I will take the first one from Alex Sanchez. Thank you. Do you have a cost comparison chart with other meats? We don't, but we've linked at the bottom of the comparison chart for the resource use to other information that you can find, and you can keep digging a little bit more if you want to keep learning about protein comparison and the resources that they use.
All right, and I can take one more question. This next question is from Shetty, who would like to know what were some challenges with creating some of our infographics, and how would we test the effectiveness of infographics to get across your message? So one of the biggest challenges of creating infographics is just working with the branding material and making sure that it aligned with the material that they already have. So since Get Hooked is already a company that has been established a few years back, they already have a lot of different marketing materials. They have their website up. So the biggest challenge was making sure that the infographics we created fit in with everything else that they've already made. And then in terms of seeing how it can reach a broader audience, that's a little bit beyond our scope with this project, but it is something that we suggested to Get Hooked, is to work to kind of do additional customer surveys and maybe focus groups to see how both these infographics and the communication materials that we made could like help them increase the number of members that they have. All right, and that's all the time we have for questions. I'm going to turn it back to Lisa, who will introduce our next group, and thank you all so much for joining us.
It's a wonderful job. That's just so great to see the support of the local community organization, and again, beautiful presentation. So now we will transition to another local client, which is the city of Santa Barbara. And this project is Community for Climate Action. And so I will now welcome Tess Hooper, Yirui Zhang, and Geoff Cook.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get things shared here. All right, great, fantastic. Good morning and welcome all. My name is Jeffrey Cook, and I am joined by my group members, Tess Hooper and Yirui Zhang, to present our communication capstone project, Community for Climate Action, developing a public outreach plan for the city of Santa Barbara. Although we may not think this is the case, extreme warming has already arrived in the United States. The principal cause for this is the generation of greenhouse gases from a variety of sources. In fact, the average temperature in Santa Barbara has increased by 2.3 degrees Celsius since the year 1895, making it one of the fastest warming counties in the lower 48 states. Ventura, which is just 30 minutes south of Santa Barbara, is number 1. Our nation recently celebrated its 50th annual Earth Day, and while crafting the city's next iteration of its climate action plan, we hope to collaborate with our greatest natural resource of all, our community. Together with the city of Santa Barbara and its remarkably diverse and talented community, we believe actionable change can be made. So what exactly is a climate action plan? Basically, it is a strategic framework of strategies and practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These are used by cities and municipalities to influence and inform decision-making and include aggressive emissions reduction targets. The city last created its climate action plan in 2012 and is pursuing a new iteration principally focused on reducing the rate at which carbon emissions are generated. At that time, it identified emissions targets for years 2020 and 2030, as well as citywide emissions inventories and forecasts. What it did not include, however, is a robust plan for collaborating with key community members and how to engage with their input on achieving these goals. And this is where we step in. We wanted to really understand the challenges and concerns of key stakeholders within the greater Santa Barbara community. This would include collaboration with industry professionals and community organizations, to name a few, who know the city well and represent potential disadvantaged communities. Our hope is this engagement would foster greater ownership in the city's pursuit to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Santa Barbara. To do so, we first researched numerous city stakeholders to see who should be at the table and organized them by theme, which will be discussed in a moment. We then designed a set of 2 workshops for each of our identified themes, and finally, we developed a program to engage participation from the city's key communities, paying particular attention to environmental justice concerns, as well as non-English speaking community members. To describe the results of some of that research and paint a picture of what these workshops will really look like, I'd like to turn it over to Tess. Tess?
Thanks, Geoff. Our first step in our collaboration with the city was to conduct stakeholder research within 5 unique themes: energy, transportation, education, urban development, and water resources and solid waste. During this research process, we identified 56 relevant organizations throughout all 5 sectors. These included governmental organizations, corporations, and nonprofits. Within these organizations, we identified 88 relevant individual stakeholders, including executive directors, board members, council members, and others. To give you an idea of who some of these relevant organizations are in Santa Barbara, let's take a look at the energy sector as an example. Here are just a few of the stakeholders we identified within the energy sector in Santa Barbara. Coastal Solar is a solar installation company. Community Environmental Council is an NGO partnering with organizations across a number of environmental issues. And Grid Alternatives in Central Coast is a nonprofit that leads teams of volunteers and trainees to assist in the installation of solar hardware on low-income houses throughout the Central Valley. Now that we've identified the stakeholders, we needed to brainstorm how the city would engage with them during the process of updating their climate action plan. In order to engage with these stakeholders, the city would host 2 information gathering workshops per sector. The relevant stakeholders within each category would be invited to these sector-specific workshops. The first workshop would be mainly information gathering and to gain insight into the stakeholders' respective expertise and experiences. During these workshops, the city would engage in discussion to identify gaps in the current climate approach. For example, where and how might stakeholders further reduce emissions, or what barriers currently exist to achieving the city's emissions targets. The next step is to develop specific strategies and actionable goals to ensure that the city, stakeholders, and community members feel ownership over and confidence in the direction of the climate action plan. Therefore, the city will hold a second workshop for the same stakeholders within each sector. Workshop 2.0 will identify strategies for incorporating the lessons learned and provide a platform for stakeholders to engage with one another to further develop a more collaborative climate action plan. Given that these workshops will most likely be virtual, we wanted to make them as interactive as possible through breakout sessions, polling, and other activities. To set both the city and stakeholders up for virtual engagement, we developed sector-specific informational briefs to be distributed to each individual stakeholder to refer to during these workshops. I will now pass it off to Yirui to discuss these informational briefs.
Thank you, Tess. So here is an example for Education Workshop B2 1.0. The informational brief starts with an overview about the city's climate action plan and the goals of this meeting. We also developed a workshop agenda, including attendee introduction and a stakeholder breakout discussion. And for the breakout discussion, we designed a few sector-specific questions to identify and understand the gaps in the current climate actions. And here are the 3 questions we have for Education Workshop. And in the end of the meeting, to conclude, a city staff member will summarize the key takeaways in the meeting, and the notes taken during the breakout sessions can be combined to create a word cloud. And here is an example of word cloud generated for the Education Workshop meeting. An important element to this climate action plan is collaborative engagement between communities and the city. To that end, we developed a 12-month volunteer climate ambassador program to directly support community outreach for the city's most vulnerable communities. By reaching out to community members and leading climate discussions, the ambassadors will understand communities' perspective on the climate actions and also at the same time promote climate awareness among communities. The climate ambassadors will function as a spokesperson for the nuanced challenges of the communities. Specifically, ambassadors will pay particular attention to disadvantaged groups and minority groups to make sure all voices are heard. The mission of the cities of Zimbabwe's energy and climate program is to help the city thrive through improving energy efficiency, increasing clean energy, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We can only do so by relying upon our greatest resource, our people. With the support from our communities, we believe that actionable changes can be made. And here we would like to thank all different people and groups, especially our clients, staff in the city of Zimbabwe, Bren Communication Department, and also the greater Bren community for their support. And thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to your questions and feedback. Thanks.
So thank you all for joining us. We're just kind of waiting for some of the questions to pop in here, even though we do have some limited time.
Yeah, it looks like we have one question. I can answer that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So we have one question that asks, what were some of the key barriers to emission reduction that we identified in these informational workshops? So all of the work that we did was prior to, the workshops haven't been held yet. The actual stakeholder outreach hasn't been conducted yet. We were just kind of doing the pre-planning to help the city, set up the city to engage in the stakeholder outreach, but no outreach has yet been done. Thank you.
There's one other question here I'll jump on. So just thanking us helping the city advance their climate action plan. What do we think are some of the easier strategies to implement to reduce climate impacts, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? That's a really good question. I would hate to speak for some of the community members that we're anxious to hear from once this gets rolled out. Our scope sort of stopped immediately before implementation, and that's where these stakeholders would step in with their unique perspective, unique feedback, and expertise to help inform that sort of an approach. Awesome. I think we've got a lot of other great groups to cover here, so at this point I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, really excellent work. I second the comment about, thanks to helping create a climate action plan for our city. That's really great work. And also just wonderful to see how you're focusing on the inclusivity and getting a variety of groups involved, which is always so important. All right. So now we will work with another city-related project. This group worked with 3 different clients, and that's the City of Lompoc, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Vandenberg Air Force Base, so not too far from where we are in Santa Barbara. So they worked on the Western Snowy Plover Conservation, and so I'd like to welcome Tara Jagadeesh, Chase Brewster, Hope Cupples, Renee Albrecht, and Robert Heim.
Okay. Thanks everyone so much for being here. My name is Chase Brewster. I'm here with my teammates Renee, Albrecht, Hope Cupples, Robert Heim, and Tara Jagadeesh. And we are really excited to share with you our work on balancing public beach access with Western Snowy Plover conservation. This is Surf Beach, part of one of the last remaining stretches of pristine coastal dune habitat in California. It's located on Vandenberg Air Force Base in northern Santa Barbara County, and it is also the closest beach to the city of Lompoc. Surf Beach is also home to the largest breeding population of Western Snowy Plovers. The Western Snowy Plover is a small shorebird that lives on coastal dunes, and it is a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. When the plover was listed as threatened in 1993, a long stretch of Surf Beach was permanently roped off to protect nesting grounds. In addition, the Air Force had a policy that the entire beach would close to the public for the duration of the breeding season if more than 50 people trespassed into the roped off nesting ground. For 20 years, this never happened. However, in 6 of the 7 years, the beach has been haunted due to violations. After consistently losing access to their nearest beach, Lompoc residents submitted a petition in 2019 to reverse the beach closure trespassing policy. After a groundbreaking interagency meeting at Surf Beach between the Coastal Commission, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Air Force, an agreement was made to change this policy. Plover nesting grounds would remain roped off, but all of Surf Beach would no longer close due to trespassing violations. While beach access has now been assured to Lompoc residents, there remains lingering tensions over the Western Snowy Plover and beach access. Around town, it is not uncommon to see anti-plover bumper stickers. Though the policy has now changed, there is still a high level of animosity towards the plovers and their conservation, and that's where our project comes in.
Okay, so we worked in partnership with the City of Lompoc, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Vandenberg Air Force Base towards the goal of fostering environmental stewardship among Lompoc residents, hopefully to gain a better understanding of community concerns and needs surrounding Surf Beach access. To accomplish this goal, we began our project with audience research, which really helped us understand the scope and complexity of the problem. It also informed the creation of our communication strategy and ultimately our outreach toolkit. Our audience research was composed of 2 main parts, informational interviews as well as a public survey that was disseminated online. Our 8 informational interviews were conducted with Lompoc community members, snowy plover biologists, local elected officials, Air Force Base law enforcement, and California Coastal Commission staff. Our survey ultimately reached 273 residents, 91% of which were from the City of Lompoc. We asked survey respondents questions about Surf Beach, general feelings towards the protection of threatened species, and the importance of public beach access more generally. We also asked them more specific questions about their awareness of the snowy plover and the regulations in place to protect them. Unsurprisingly, we found that out of our survey respondents, Surf Beach was the most popular beach to visit. 90% of respondents were also aware of the plover and regulations in place to protect them. We also collected information to help our clients with the dissemination of outreach materials and found that Facebook was the most popular method of staying up to date on current events. An example of one of our survey questions is below. We asked respondents if they support actions to protect the snowy plover and found that 116 people said that they do support actions, but only to an extent.
So based on the results that Hope discussed from our interviews and surveys, several themes emerged. First, the issue of environmental injustice continually came up. Residents of Lompoc, many of whom are low-income minorities, feel as though they have been disproportionately burdened by this lack of access to coastal resources. They wonder why more affluent communities see less stringent regulations for beach activities. Second, we found that there are many enduring misconceptions about snowy plovers. Many mistake the very common sanderling for the threatened plover. We also found that there is a need for transparency of information. Many residents support conservation efforts, but feel as though they haven't been shown any data that these policies have actually had a positive impact on bird populations. These sentiments can be seen in the quote here from a survey respondent who says, "Nobody has shown that the community that our sacrifice has been worth it. There has been no evidence presented." And finally, there's still a lot of lingering confusion over the regulations. Many are aware that the closure policy has changed, but are still unclear on what exactly they can and can't do. Now, based on the themes that we found in our research, we developed a strategy to address some of these issues. With our communication work, we aim to accomplish several goals. First, to educate the community about regulation updates. Second, to validate community sentiment and ensure that residents feel heard. Third, to clarify misconceptions. And fourth, to increase transparency of information. We use several different tactics to accomplish these goals, including developing a media toolkit for our client with content such as a news story highlighting the community, updated signage to clarify misconceptions, and Facebook content to keep residents informed. And now I'll pass it off to Renee and Robert to share the content that we created.
Thanks, Tara. Since our survey identified that many Lompoc residents are getting news from social media, we developed a news story to be circulated on Facebook. With our news story, we hope to shift the narrative about Surf Beach from the Plover to the community so that residents of Lompoc feel heard and recognized. Also, our survey revealed that many Lompoc residents are confused about current beach access policies. With our news story, we hope to educate the community about the recent changes. While visiting Surf Beach, we saw this empty placard. We thought this could be used as an opportunity for community outreach materials. In response, we made the following infographic about Western snowy plovers. Zooming in on some of the features of this infographic, we can see how it reflects our communication strategy. In our infographic, we feature information in English and Spanish based on the results of our survey. We highlight Surf Beach as a unique location for snowy plover recovery, since it's one of the last remaining stretches of undeveloped coastal dune habitat in California. We explain why snowy plovers are vulnerable to human disturbance, and we leverage the charismatic plover chick to help the audience connect with plovers. Finally, we clarify one of the misconceptions identified in our audience research, that plovers are frequently confused with far more common sanderlings.
Another example of the outreach material that our team created is shown here. This is a social media post that could be shared on Facebook and Instagram, which are two of the platforms that our team found are used most often to keep up with news in the Lompoc community. Informed by the responses in our surveys and interviews, this post serves to educate the community about the beach regulation update in a concise, visually engaging way. It also touches upon the central role that the community has played in promoting local beach access, and it uses a friendly tone to remind the community that by following beach rules, they can help keep Surf Beach open for all to enjoy. While balancing public beach access with military land restrictions and threatened species recovery is a challenge, there is a promising path forward for Surf Beach. It centers around acknowledging the sacrifices that the local community has made, clarifying misconceptions about Western snowy plovers, and increasing transparency about the recovery effort. Our team hopes that the outreach materials we have created help to address these concepts, while also highlighting the uniqueness of Surf Beach and its symbolism for the diversity and strength of the Lompoc community. With a mindful approach to beach recreation, community members will be able to access and care for their beach for years to come. We would like to extend our deepest thanks to our clients at Vandenberg Air Force Base, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the City of Lompoc. We also want to thank all of the participants who agreed to be interviewed or who took our survey. And notably, we would like to thank Lisa Leombruni, the Environmental Communications Program Director at the Bren School, for her support and help throughout this project. We greatly appreciated the opportunity to share our work with you today, and we look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
As we wait for a few questions to populate, I can start by asking one. So I'm curious what the next steps are for the outreach, as far as you know, once you hand over your media toolkit and strategy that you outlined.
Yeah, I can jump in and answer that one. Thanks for the question, Lisa. I think a lot of our work this quarter was really to put together the audience research for our clients to help them have a good idea of what they can do with the outreach materials that we created. And I think we are ultimately hoping that our news story will be published, ideally in the Lompoc Record, which is a local newspaper. And ideally that news story would be shared on our clients' Facebook or social media channels, since we did find that was the most common way that residents stayed up to date on current events. So that's one main way. And then we also are providing them with this outreach toolkit as a whole, so that they can kind of keep pulling from these themes and our recommendations and any more outreach materials that they produce in the future. And then I do see, oh, we have a lot of questions coming in now. Let's see, did anybody see one? I'm reading through them. One question was the survey disseminated in English and Spanish? And yes, it was. We knew that was important for the Lompoc community, so we made sure to make that an option. And then let's see, maybe we can answer one more. One question was, is the beach set to be open this summer? Has the social media infographic received any response yet? And to answer that, yes, so the beach is set to be open with this new regulation change. They will no longer be closing the beach during the summer breeding season, even if violations are issued for people crossing into the plover habitat. So the beach will remain open for the summer. And as far as the infographic, we have yet to disseminate this out into the community, but we are hoping to do that in partnership with our clients soon.
And hope I can add one more thing onto that too. We've seen increased beach attendance with the quarantining situation going on. So it's almost more important now than ever that we can inspire some stewardship among the Lompoc community.
Great. Well, really excellent job again. It's so nice to see this comprehensive audience research to media toolkit and outreach strategy arc made possible by the five of you. So I'm glad you had that opportunity. The other thing I'll point out is it's really nice to see with that type of research that there are environmental justice concerns that emerge that you're able to communicate to the clients and sort of show, I think as Robert pointed out, that it's important to acknowledge the sacrifice and work with the community to allow them access, right? So really nice job. Okay. So let's move on to our next project, which is a creative project. It is a podcast called Greenhouse Sass. So I'd now like to pass the presentation over to Sandro, Lallas, James Fuller, and Karan Shetty.
Sweet. Right. Can everyone see the screen? Yes?
Yep.
Sweet. Cool. Well, hey everyone, thanks for coming to our presentation. My name is James. I'm joined by my fellow environmental students, Sandro and Karan, and we are excited to talk with you today about our podcast, Greenhouse Sass. So we firmly believe that if you can't laugh, you lose. And by first being able to joke about the state of the environment, we believe we can look more seriously at issues that are often overwhelming but are important to look at. So we do this by finding doom and gloom headlines and then breaking them down into funny but also actionable ideas as a way to take our agency more seriously.
So for this podcast series, for this class, we created 3 different podcast episodes, one about microplastics, one about coral bleaching, and one about energy. And these are different topics that we've really gotten interested in at Bren. And the structure is that each one of us will lead an episode while the other 2 kind of help move the storyline along. So with that, I'll let Karan explain a little more about how we actually communicate some of the headlines that we are finding.
Thanks, Sandro. So in our episodes, we have several recurring segments, the most common of which is called Hot Takes, where we take the time to present a kind of a controversial opinion, at least controversial within our like environmental or like progressive community. And we like break it down and kind of hope that we force our audience to think a little more critically about some of these issues. An example hot take within like the context of our energy episode is, I don't think nuclear energy is that bad. And here's why. Some other segments we have are things like Mama Nature, chemistry breakdowns, and at the end of each episode, we close out with actionable solutions for our audience. So now that we've talked about like what our podcast is, our goals, and how we set things up, we'd like to actually play you a 5-minute preview from our first episode on microplastics. So Aaliyah will play that clip now.
We recently found a headline that's got us shaken up a little bit. Microplastics have been found in human guts, and it looks like the average person eats or breathes about 40 grams of microplastic per year. But to make sense of this, we're going to lean on James here, our resident expert. He works with Dr. Roland Geyer at the Bren School, studying microplastic impacts, and has worked with Adidas assessing microplastic generation from shoes. So James, why don't you get us started? What is going on with microplastics, and why should we and our audience members care?
Well, first off, thank you for referring to me as an expert.
Yeah, it was hard to do.
Thanks. Okay, appreciate it. Give you a name tag. So plastic is everywhere, and it's made its way into like literally everything in our modern world. It's kind of hard to imagine a world without it. It's a part of the clothes we're currently wearing, the cars we're driving around, and as the headline states, even the air we're breathing in and the food we eat. However, this like mass use of plastic is only about 60 years old, and nearly all of it is still here on this earth in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear you on that, but you're talking about plastic. We want to hear about microplastics.
Okay, so all plastic, if left out in the elements, begins to break down and become microplastic. Microplastic just refers to the size of the plastic. So it would be any plastic between 1 micrometer and 5 millimeters in size. Think microscopic to about the size of a sesame seed. They're super common, like literally trillions of these pieces are currently circulating the earth at this moment. I'm sure we could find some in this room if we looked closely.
Damn, trillions?
Yeah, like there's estimated to be between 13 and 50 trillion microplastics in the ocean, and then an undetermined amount on land.
So you said that microplastics are just smaller plastic that's created when, larger pieces of plastic are broken down, which sounds important. Can you give us a little more info on that?
Well, there's two main sources. They could be like primary or secondary. The majority of the world's microplastics are thought to be secondary microplastics, meaning they come from mismanaged plastic waste. So when trash is either carried away by the wind, swept away in water, or even just left out in the sun and it starts to degrade, the plastic in that trash breaks down into something smaller than 5 millimeters in size, making it a microplastic.
I mean, my intuition tells me that developed countries have very comprehensive waste management systems in place. So plastic isn't just left out to break down in mass amounts, right? I mean, I pay Marburg like a ridiculous amount for something, right?
And honestly, hold on, the amount we pay Marburg is kind of ridiculous. Sorry, James, go on.
They actually raised it recently.
Oh,
you guys
my
get that
God.
letter? Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I don't want to hate on
$5 a month. Heavy stuff.
I honestly don't read those letters, so maybe I should start reading those.
If you don't read those, you are trash.
You should probably check your credit card statement then.
Oh, damn. Good point.
But yeah, I don't want to hate on Marburg, but like the majority of microplastics that would be released in a developed country like the US would be these primary microplastics that are like directly released as small particles. They usually flake off of things as we use them or were added into a product.
So like cheaply made stuff, just like crap from Walmart?
Not necessarily. Like even think like the biggest source of these sort of primary microplastics are like the synthetic rubber in your car tires. So as you're driving around, they're just going to start flaking off over time. They also come from things like paint flaking off of buildings, AstroTurf, the outsoles of your shoes, synthetic fibers from washing your clothes. We're still developing the scope of it, but the list can kind of go on indefinitely.
And in general, do we have any idea how much microplastic we're releasing, or are we just kind of guesstimating?
I guess all of science, I think, is just guesstimating, right? I think so. Different government agencies have tried to put a hard number on this, and they basically have come to the conclusion that across a range of studies that the average person releases somewhere between 600 and 4,000 grams of primary microplastics per person per year. So think even like if everyone has a comprehensive waste management system and you throw everything away in its proper place, just through our everyday activities, we are still kind of trashing the earth with somewhere between like a baseball and a newborn baby's worth of like synthetic waste every year.
What?
Okay, sorry, that was a weird analogy, but that's like a baseball, like
yes, yes, we know what a baseball is.
Okay,
can you explain what a baby is? I wasn't sure about that.
Well, when a man and woman love each other.
All right. I kind of get your drift here. So you're saying that we each put about a baby worth of microplastics into the environment each year. So what happens after that?
Yeah, so James, if you could share your screen again for our final slide. All right, yeah, we hope you liked that 5-minute preview of our Greenhouse Sass episode. As of last night, we were stoked to announce that Spotify has approved our podcast. So you can find it on Spotify right now. If you just search Greenhouse Sass, we're also on Anchor. The link to that is posted below. We would like to thank Dr. Lisa Leombruni for all her support so far throughout this quarter and this year, as well as the Bren Comm department. And we also want to thank all of our Crash Test audience members who gave us a lot of feedback. Right now, we have 2 episodes uploaded on Spotify. We'll have our 3rd one on energy uploaded in the next couple of days. Thank you all for your time, and we welcome any questions at this time.
All right, question time. So we've got one from Geoff. What is a hot take that you would like to share, which we didn't get a chance to hear as part of your presentation? I think Karan, a man of many controversial opinions.
Yeah, I can take that.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that, an example hot take is like in our energy episode, we talk a lot about renewable energy, but my hot take is that I don't think nuclear energy is that bad as like a power source to use. And I talk about why, and there's a lot of fear around nuclear energy and why maybe in my opinion, a lot of that's unfounded. Another example hot take would be within microplastics, there's this ocean cleanup project, which goes out to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch to scoop out trash. And James's hot take on that is that it's not actually going to solve our problem of microplastics. So just like little 2 to 4 minute segments like that, that hopefully we know our audience majority agrees with most of the things they're saying, but we wanted to throw some curveballs, change things up a little bit, and maybe teach people some new things or not.
Let's see. We've got one from a crowd favorite, Danny Elkin. How much sass is too much sass? I'll take that one. The limit does not exist. There's another one from Sarah. Who do you imagine your audience is, and how does that affect the process for creating your episodes? Maybe Sandro, I think you've done some audience testing. Do you want to take that one?
I guess, yeah. So we think our audience of people that are millennials, around our age group that really care about the environment, but are just overwhelmed by the kind of content and media that is out there. And so we're really just trying to give it to them on a silver platter in a way that's easily accessible and digestible. So thank you for your question. I want to answer another one we got. So from Sandy Fogg, thanks for your question. Planning to continue after Bren? We are. We might rebrand, but we definitely want to line up some more episodes and keep this going. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we're getting a few questions about are we continuing this after Bren? And yes, we are planning on continuing creating episodes when we graduate. Do we have time for couple more questions?
Yeah, there's
or-
a few that are very simple and quick. If you want to take another one or two, and then we'll go to our last presentation.
Okay. Got another question from Danny. James, do you want to take that one?
What does it say?
I love the idea of using humor.
Yeah, totally. I think that's like the best way to engage people, right? Like everyone likes to laugh or know a good joke. And yeah, I think it's like a key way to not make people feel like overwhelmed by the news.
Yeah, and we'll answer one final question. Has this process help you? How has this process help you self-identify as communicators? I think this process, we're three guys in our like mid-20s, and we're trying to reach out to an audience that's more than just other guys in their mid-20s, especially for like science issues, especially in our Bren community, which is majority not guys in their mid-20s. So we had to really take a back seat, like step back and really think about like who is the audience we're trying to craft our message to. Sandro, and we all talk to different people about what's the best, like what kind of jokes would land, like because some things that we would find funny when we're just riffing might not be like universally found to be like funny or appropriate or things like that. So yeah, we feel more confident in, we're not perfect, we're not there yet, but we're gaining confidence
perfect
in our communication skill. Yeah.
They're pretty good after the comm focus, right? So really nice work. And thanks, Geoff, for answering just a couple more. We had a flurry of questions, so we thought we would try to take just a couple more. So thanks again for a wonderful project. I just want to give you credit for coming up with creative content during such a stressful quarter. Also from bringing it to a point where you feel comfortable uploading it to Spotify and launching it more formally. And you have, really well thought out segments to help identify your brand. So I just wish you the best of luck as you proceed with your podcast, and I'll definitely be listening. So with that, I would now like to invite our last group to present. So we have a group that is doing their creative project. It's something they developed, but also in collaboration with and related to Global Fishing Watch. So this last project is called Small Scale, Big Deal, and it's with Ilayda Dinch, Gracie White, B.R. Hoover, and Nelson Gould.
Okay, hi everybody. Sorry, I had to unmute myself for a second. Yeah, so we are Small Scale Big Deal. This is a project that was really born out of B.R. Hoover's trips over the last summer with her internship to Indonesia and Mexico to visit local fishing communities to better understand how they live their lives and her experiences over the summer. She really wanted to highlight how these fishing communities live their lives and the trials and tribulations of what it is to be a small scale fisher in the 21st century. So overall, our project is really to illustrate who those small scale fishers are, how they impact the world, and how the world impacts them. So how our fishing purchases, 1,000, 2,000 miles away, impact the daily lives of these small-scale fishermen. And who we plan to reach for this project is really multifaceted, because we're trying to do a multimedia approach to telling these stories. So we've made an Instagram page, which is made for a little bit wider audience, still environmentally and socially conscious people focused, but we've also had a surprising amount of engagement from people just searching the hashtag fish and hashtag fishing hashtags in Instagram. So I think we have a wider base and potential impact from Instagram outside of just environmentally conscious people. And then with our videos, they are really, emotional and good videos to convey the struggles that these people face in their day-to-day lives and how they overcome those struggles. That'll really impact everyone that watches them, but especially those that are already interested in environmentally and socially conscious issues. So for this project, we wanted to create that Instagram page, and then we wanted to create a few episodes for our video series, which we're going to show 2 of today. A video that takes place in Rajampat, and another that takes place in Puerto San Carlos, Mexico. And it's worth noting that all of this is possible because of the Global Fishing Watch. And again, B.R. Hoover's experience over the summer interning for the Global Fishing Watch and getting to get into these local communities and have contacts with people inside these communities. And again, that would not be possible without Global Fishing Watch. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ilayda to talk about our Instagram campaign.
Thanks, Nelson. For our social media, we wanted to start with an independent Instagram account to highlight stories and problems from small-scale fisheries. And this way, we aim to raise awareness and make consumers think about their decisions. And also, this gives us a platform to promote our films. And for now, we are creating a brand, but at some point, we might partner with an organization like RARE or Global Fishing Watch to keep this Instagram account going. And our ideal audience is socially and environmentally conscious people with a special interest in fisheries, but we try to avoid scientific language while being informative, so it's good for the general audience as well. And the content types we included so far are the definition of small-scale fishery and gender inequality, how women are also a big part of fishing, as you can see on the right. And environmental concerns such as biodiversity laws, size and catch limits. And then we also touched upon consumers' role in these problems. And in general, we want to post beautiful and interesting pictures from small-scale fisheries all around the world. And we wanted to balance the informative posts and beautiful scenic posts so the audience is not overwhelmed by the information that we are giving. And this is where we are at right now, and we'll continue to post more pictures and videos. And if you haven't already, give us a follow at Small Scale Big Deal on Instagram. Now I will hand it over to BR to talk about our episodes.
Thank you, Ilayda. So we have a total of 5 episodes that we would like to release, and each episode is based on a fishery that I had the pleasure of visiting last summer. And as of today, we have 2 completed, which we'll be showing today, and there are 3 that are still in production. The episodes that we'll show today are called Fishers of Raja Ampat, which is a story of a small-scale fishery in Indonesia, and the Generosa harvest, which is based on a small-scale fishery in Mexico. And although trying to create content that we felt did the fishers and their family justice was challenging, in the end, I think we all had a lot of fun making these videos. So we hope you enjoy them. And Ilya can play them now.
In a remote corner of the South Pacific, a place that feels lost in time, although these waters hold what feels like an endless supply of fish, it's not overcrowded with fishing vessels. The only ones allowed to fish here are the fishers from the community who hold exclusive fishing rights. But how is this possible? How did these communities and the small-scale fishers stand up to the big competition? This story takes place in Raja Ampat, an Indonesian archipelago consisting of over 1,500 islands. The residents are spread out, living in over 85 coastal villages. The people here live in tight-knit communities. Neighbors help each other out, and the children can play around feeling safe. For many island communities in Raja Ampat, Fisheries are the primary source of food, income, and is crucial to the cultural heritage of the indigenous people. Fishing is a tradition that has been passed down for generations. They learned to carve their boats from trees found on the island. They learned to fish with gear as simple as a hook on a fishing line. They find the fish by letting nature guide them to the best spots. Abiding traditional rules of the sea that have been passed down for generations, the dispersed people in Rajampat have lived in a balance with their natural world. But even Rajampat, as remote as it is, wasn't immune to what was happening in the world around it. Driven by the growing demand for seafood, vessels came from far away. They came from other communities, other areas of Indonesia, and even other countries to extract what they could. And a little over a decade ago, the fisheries around this island were decimated by unregulated commercial fishing, poaching, and damaging practices, threatening the lifeline for the people who depend on this fishery. How do you compete against those who don't play by the same rules? How do you win when even winning means different things? In 2018, the communities rose up and changed the course of their story. Village leaders from the surrounding islands gathered with local government officials to come up with a plan to protect Rajampat's fisheries. They came up with a plan that worked for both parties. The villages would be legally granted stewardship of their own waters. They were granted exclusive fishing rights and empowered to act as enforcement against illegal fishers. As a community-managed fishery, they can continue to fish sustainably, as their ancestors did, and continue the tradition for generations. Stories like these are extremely rare. Small-scale fishers, especially those in rural coastal communities, are routinely excluded from the conversation on fishery management. Without representation, policies are made that put efficiency over sustainability and profit over people. Many fishers and their families have had to change their way of life, a life full of tradition that has been passed down for generations. We can all do our part to support small-scale fishers. We can support organizations that fight for environmental justice as well as environmental conservation. We can be aware of where our seafood comes from and ensure that it's sustainably sourced, and make sure that you always ask before you buy.
Los niños de aquí creen que son invencibles. Todavía no sienten el peligro. Puerto San Carlos is a fishing community. Over 50% of the population depend on Magdalena Bay for their livelihood, and yet fishing only brings in around $340 per month. Not enough to cover a family's basic needs. Today marks the start of the geoduck season in Puerto San Carlos. The fishers here have just 5 days to fill their quota for the clam, worth more than 3 times their usual catch. Given the value of the geoduck, known here as the generosa, and how strictly these 5 days are monitored, there is not a minute to spare. Diving, and diving for the geoduck, is inherently risky. But this race to fish creates added incentive to throw caution to the wind. Much of this equipment hasn't been used since the last geoduck harvest, and pieces are missing or broken. If these fishers are not able to get their equipment functioning, they may lose a precious day of geoduck fishing. Or worse, if their equipment fails while a diver is underwater, the diver may lose their life, as surfacing quickly can cause a deadly phenomena known as the bends. With so much money at stake, the fishers are willing to depend on jury-rigged solutions. These solutions included lighting a glove on fire to dry out a potentially flooded generator. We watched them fix the oxygen motor, the air hose, and the pressure gun used to unearth the mollusks from the muddy bottom. Instead of scuba, the fishers here use a different method known as hookah diving. Hookah diving consists of a gas-powered air compressor that delivers air through a long hose to the diver underwater. And even with proper training, hookah diving presents some unique risks for the divers, such as carbon monoxide poisoning from the boat exhaust, or having the air compressor fail while the diver is underwater. He descends, hoping the equipment functions properly. Five hours later, the harvest begins to appear at the surface. As we tasted the catch, we reflected on how valuable each bite is, and wondered where the rest of it would end up. Geoducks landed across all locations in Mexico are shipped to Ensenada, where they're packed and processed for exportation through LAX International Airport. A single live geoduck can be sold upwards of $150 per pound. The processors in Mexico have monopoly power regarding prices paid for the geoduck. Due to this, fishermen receive just $2 to $4 per pound. Despite the immense value of the geoduck and how expensive they are in restaurants, hardly any of that wealth trickles back to the fishers. After passing a size requirement and quota inspection, the fishers have successfully completed 1 day of geoduck fishing. The regulations are in place for a reason. Roughly 18,000 small boats are operating in an area that can only support around 12,000. Not only is this leading to ecological damage, but the fishermen who depend on this resource are working harder and taking more risks to catch fewer fish. While the demand for the geoduck requires fisheries to restrict their catch or risk the extinction of the species, the way the restrictions are currently constructed places all risk on the fishers. We returned to town with the day's harvest, but the happy reunion was fleeting. On the single day, over 20 fishers required hospitalization due to the risks of hookah diving. One of our guides learned that his friend stayed at a depth of 30 meters for 5 hours collecting geoducks, and when he surfaced, suffered a severe case of the bends. Unfortunately, this led to his death. He was not alone. This happens every year, during every day of the season. These fishers have found themselves in a lose-lose situation. They are vilified by environmental groups for fishing threatened species, but the rules in place force them to risk their lives to make a living and provide for their families. There must be a better way. Okay, thank you all so much. I know we're a little bit over time, but hopefully we have time for just 1 or 2 questions. So we have one question that's come in. How did the history of established marine reserves in Raja Pot affect defining and securing fishing rights for local communities? Barbara Rose, would you like to take that one?
Sure, I'll try to crack at it. So in Rajan Pot, there are marine reserves to protect the natural ecosystem, and the agreement that was actually reached by the communities and the government was called a TURF, Territorial Use Rights Fisheries, which actually works in kind of in concert with the marine reserve. So it's a no-take zone for everyone else not approved. So that means that other commercial fishers cannot fish there, but only the indigenous people and the local communities that have secured fishing rights to the areas that they have been fishing for, like historically been fishing. So they're the only ones that are allowed to fish there. But at the same time, they also have to patrol that area that they're fishing in.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question from Juan Silva, who was actually a part of the, he was probably our main cameraman over the summer. He is asking, how do you envision reforms that can be applied to small-scale fisheries in general around the world? And Barbara Rose, I think this one's probably for you, since you were the one that actually got to see and talk to these fishers firsthand.
Yeah, I think like this is a tough question, and I've thought about it a lot. And I would love to hear your opinion too, Juan. But I think that the major reform is just trying to include them in the conversation on fishery management. Surprisingly, it's fairly recent that people are saying that small-scale fisheries cannot be managed the same way as industrial fisheries because they're completely different. It's like apples and oranges. So I think the inclusion in the major decision making is the first step towards reform in a way that the fisheries will have a sustainable future, both for the people who depend on it and for the natural resources that we all are here to protect.
Wonderful. Okay, well, with that, I think I will probably hand it back over to Lisa, since I know we're a little over time. So thank you all so much again for coming out and supporting the comm students. We really appreciate it.
Yes, excellent job. It's so amazing to see a multifaceted media project like that. And it's just wonderful to see those stories of those communities and those individuals featured. And it's just so important for everybody to be aware of those stories. So thank you. And so I also just wanted to say thank you to all of you for showing up and supporting our comm students. And if you want to see these films again, read up on or look at any of the materials created for any of these projects, they will be posted on brencom.com within the next week. And we also have a Bren Communication YouTube channel. So please follow up if you're interested. And also, just again, join me in congratulating remotely our graduating comm students. It's been such a pleasure working with you these past 2 years, and I'm actually getting kind of emotional now, even though I can't see you. I know you're there. And I think all of the hard work, the creativity, just you showing up and being here, like a part of the focus for years, and then obviously these wonderful projects has been just such an amazing thing to see. So thank you all so much, and thank you all again for coming to help celebrate their creativity and hard work. All right, bye everyone.